Hello, Leo. Did something in your spirit pull you here today, without you knowing why? Because if it did, trust that it's not random. This week, something big is shifting in your life, financially, spiritually, and cosmically. And in this video, we're going to reveal why your God is breaking the silence. Welcome to Eternal Mindfulness, where your inner knowing meets the universe's timing. This isn't just another horoscope reading. It's a deeply guided, intuitive message written specifically for you, Leo, for the transformational week of May 27th through June 2nd. We are walking through a sacred doorway this week, illuminated by a new moon in Gemini and amplified by the powerful Mercury Cazimi on May 29th. This is no ordinary alignment. It's the moment where your voice, your message, and your divine mission come into direct alignment with cosmic will. If you felt blocked, quieted, or forgotten, this is the week where the silence cracks open, and light floods in. The universe doesn't shout. It whispers. And when it does speak, it's rarely through noise. It's through alignment. Through timing. Through synchronicities like this very video reaching you at the exact moment you needed it. That's not a coincidence. That's resonance. So I ask you, Leo, what part of you has been waiting to rise, and why now? What truth have you been holding back, afraid that the world might not receive it? In Buddhist teachings, it's said that, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. But here's the truth, the teacher is no longer outside of you. It's within. It's in your courage to step up. To speak. To act. To let go of what's crumbling so you can build what's real. And before we dive deep into the messages from the cards, I want to pause and speak to your heart. Thank you. Thank you for being here, for listening, for showing up, for feeling. Every like, every comment, every subscribe you share isn't just algorithm magic. It's a signal. It tells the universe, and this community, that you are choosing growth. You are choosing clarity. You are choosing your timeline, not someone else's. Your support fuels this channel. It allows Eternal Mindfulness to continue bringing these transformational messages to souls just like yours. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You are seen. You are appreciated. You are loved. And Leo, you will want to stay with me until the very end of this reading. Because what the universe is revealing, about your money, your relationships, your next big chapter, is nothing short of stunning. The road ahead isn't just clearer now. It's divinely aligned. So tell me in the comments. What brought you here today, Leo? What part of your soul whispered, I need to watch this? Let's walk through this gateway together, and discover what's waiting on the other side. When the cosmic will begins to turn as forcefully as it is this week, it doesn't just nudge you, it demands your attention. And for you, Leo, this is not about being center stage for the applause of others, but about standing still long enough to face what the light of your own consciousness is ready to expose. With the sun as your ruling planet, your identity is deeply tied to the act of illumination. But sometimes, before light becomes guidance, it must become revelation. And revelation, as we know, can be uncomfortable. When 6 out of 7 tarot cards reveal themselves as major arcana, this is not symbolic fluff. It is a loud and clear sign that life is preparing to initiate you. These cards, Death, Tower, Hermit, the Chariot, the World, are not passive symbols. They are archetypal forces. They appear when the foundations you've relied on are no longer aligned with who you are becoming. Not because you failed, but because life is responding to your inner readiness, even if your ego hasn't caught up yet. You asked for growth. You whispered, even in silence, that you were ready for more. And now the universe is answering with the only language it knows: change. This week, that change may come as a crack in your routine, a sudden ending, a conversation that shakes you, or a realization that hits deeper than logic. And here's the invitation: rather than turning away, you are being called to pause, breathe, and shine your awareness inward. This is not about fighting the breakdown. It's about witnessing it with presence and choosing not to react from fear. In moments like this, the real question isn't, what do I do? But, who am I becoming? Because destruction is only one half of the process. The other half is clarity. Just as a forest clears itself with fire, not to die, but to reset and allow new life to thrive, your life may be shedding structures so that your deeper essence can take root. There is a teaching that speaks of burning away what is false, not with hatred or shame, but with the still fire of knowing. That knowing lives in you, even now. It's the part of you that no longer fits the mask you used to wear. The part that senses when a relationship has run its sacred course, or when a job no longer reflects your values. You are not being punished. You are being invited. Invited to step forward with more truth, more clarity, more soul. And as painful or confusing as it may feel, remember this: what is leaving your life was never truly yours to begin with. It was borrowed for a time, maybe needed at some point, but its expiration date has arrived. And the more you resist, the more friction you create. But when you surrender to the unfolding, you align with something greater than the sum of your current fears. You begin to co-create. Leo, your light is not ornamental, it's directive. But it only knows where to go when you stop chasing the crowd and turn toward the voice that has been quietly guiding you all along. You do not need to prove your worth to anyone. This week is not about appearances. It's about essence. Let your fire refine you. Let the old structures burn, not so you can be destroyed, but so that your true self, long buried beneath expectation, can finally rise without apology. There is no becoming without unbecoming. And in this sacred space between the two, you are held. You are growing. You are remembering. Keep your heart open. What's emerging on the other side is not a new version of you. It's the real one. When everything begins to fall apart, the first instinct for most is to run. To grasp for control, to deny what's slipping away, to brace against the weight of endings. But for you, Leo, there is a deeper calling now, one that asks not for resistance, but for presence. The energy this week doesn't just speak of collapse for the sake of pain. It is speaking of an essential reordering. The kind of crumbling that only happens when the soul has outgrown the structures it once needed to survive. Tower and death together are not subtle. These archetypes don't ask politely. They arrive with the force of necessity, cutting through illusion, and pulling away everything that no longer aligns with who you are becoming. But their arrival is not punishment. It is permission. Permission to stop pretending. Permission to stop holding on to what you've already silently outgrown. And in that permission lies the most radical form of courage, acceptance. Leo, your sign is known for bravery, but bravery isn't always loud or obvious. True bravery sometimes looks like sitting in the ashes of what's broken and simply breathing. It's the willingness to look at the truth without flinching, to say, yes, this is ending, and then gently asking, what now wants to begin? Endings aren't the opposite of life. They are a sacred part of its rhythm. Just like an exhale, a fall, a sunset. Everything that rises must recede, so that something deeper, truer, quieter can take its place. There is a quiet principle, one whispered rather than taught, that reminds us, all forms are impermanent. Clinging to what is crumbling only brings suffering. But when we soften into the unraveling, we begin to see it not as loss, but as movement. As direction. What looks like falling apart is often just life rearranging itself to support your next evolution. And no card symbolizes that potential better than the Chariot. The Chariot is not about chaos. It's about conscious motion. It tells us, once you've allowed the old to fall, once you've seen the truth with open eyes, then you move, not from panic, not from pride, but from the deepest center of inner knowing. This is momentum rooted in clarity, in maturity, in self-trust. You are not a victim of the collapse. You are the architect of what comes next. This moment asks you to reflect. Where have you been gripping something out of habit rather than hope? What story are you still telling yourself because it's familiar, not because it's true? These are not questions to shame you, they are invitations. Invitations to pause, to breathe, and to return to the wisdom that already lives inside you. In times like this, the most loving thing you can do is stop trying to hold it all together. Let it fall. Let the scaffolding come undone. Let the performance end. Because what's being asked of you now is not perfection. It's presence. And in that presence, you will see something beautiful. Not everything needs to be fixed. Some things simply need to be released. Your courage is not in how loudly you roar, but in how deeply you listen. Listen now. Not to the noise of fear, but to the quiet voice that says, it's okay to let go. It's okay to feel this fully. And it's okay to begin again, this time, from a place of truth. When Jupiter prepares to shift into your 12th house, the atmosphere changes in subtle but undeniable ways. This is not the kind of transit that announces itself loudly with trumpets and celebrations. Instead, it whispers behind the scenes, rearranging energies beneath the surface and quietly setting the stage for what's to come. For Leo, whose essence thrives in visibility and expression, this type of movement can feel confusing at first, especially when the blessings it brings arrive faster than your logical mind can process. A sudden payment. An unexpected opportunity. A promise once forgotten that now returns fulfilled. But with these quick shifts comes a spiritual invitation. How will you hold what comes to you when it arrives without warning? Money, in its truest form, is not merely a tool for comfort or validation. It is energy. And like all forms of energy, it must be held with care. When something comes quickly, whether it's a financial gain, a professional breakthrough, or a sudden door opening, it often triggers our unconscious patterns. Some people rush to spend, afraid it might disappear. Others cling tightly, uncertain of when abundance might come again. But the real question isn't what you do with the money, it's who you are in relationship to it. This is not about fear-based control or careless indulgence. This is about clarity, purpose, and trust. Can you stay centered when life moves fast? Can you honor the gift without being consumed by it? There's a quiet teaching that says, when you receive something unexpectedly, it's often a reflection of something you've already earned long ago, just not in the form or timing you expected. That means what's arriving for you now is not luck, it's alignment. But even alignment has to be met with awareness. That's why this moment is less about the money itself and more about what you choose to do with the doors it opens. Will you use this gift to create a foundation that supports your growth? Or will you scatter it trying to fill a space that was never about material lack in the first place? What makes this period even more significant is the return of something many of you have longed for: guidance. After months, maybe years, of silence, of pushing and hoping and wondering if anyone or anything was listening, something is responding. And no, it may not come as a booming voice or a flashing sign. It may be as simple as a conversation that shifts your thinking, a decision that feels right in your bones, or a moment of absolute inner stillness that clears your path. That stillness is not emptiness. It is the absence of distortion. And from that silence emerges the truth you've been waiting for. This truth may not lead you down the easiest road, but it will be the one that honors your strength, your gifts, and your deepest values. It is not paved with shortcuts or applause. It is lined with integrity. And when you walk it, not only does your outer world change, your inner world comes into alignment. That is the real wealth. Not the number in your bank account, but the way you carry your purpose through the world with confidence and calm. So if this week feels like a surge, a quick inflow of resources or recognition, pause before reacting. Breathe before moving. Ask yourself, is this here to be spent, or to be built upon? Is this the answer I've been waiting for, or the beginning of a greater question I now have the clarity to ask? How you respond to this moment determines what the next moment will bring. And that, Leo, is where your power truly lives. Love, for Leo, is never small. You were never built for half-hearted connections or lukewarm affection. You love with fire, with intention, with presence that fills a room. But the truth is, sometimes that very fire can become exhausting when you're the only one feeding it. The cards showing up now, Four of Pentacles, Emperor, Ten of Wands, are not just a random pull. They speak of emotional holding patterns, of control mistaken for security, and of burdens carried too long out of habit or obligation. And perhaps most of all, they ask this: are you still in this relationship because it nourishes you, or because you become used to the weight of it? There is a teaching that says, what you hold on to out of fear, holds on to you just as tightly. And nowhere is that more true than in matters of the heart. When your love becomes a performance, when your presence is filtered through the need to be accepted or understood, the relationship becomes a mask, not a mirror. And Leo, you were never meant to be masked. You were meant to be seen. It's possible that somewhere along the way, you began to overextend. Maybe you gave more of yourself to keep things together. Maybe you chose silence over conflict. Or maybe you convinced yourself that this was just a season, that if you stayed long enough, sacrificed enough, gave enough, it would eventually feel right again. But relationships, like the stars, move in cycles. And some of them reach their completion not because of failure, but because their purpose has been fulfilled. This is not about blame. It's about truth. Mercury Cazimi, especially when aligned with a new moon, is the perfect storm for illumination. Conversations that have long been delayed come forward. Emotions that were buried begin to rise. And in this kind of cosmic clarity, the most radical act you can offer yourself is honesty. Ask the questions that scare you. Say the things that ache in your throat. You don't need to decide everything in a single moment. But you do need to stop pretending you're not already carrying the knowing inside you. So ask yourself gently, am I still choosing this person, or am I just avoiding the discomfort of change? Am I safe, or am I simply familiar with the imbalance? There is a difference between stability and stagnation. One holds you. The other slowly dims your light. For those in partnerships that feel healthy and aligned, this energy will act as an amplifier. You may feel called to deepen the connection, to recommit from a place of authenticity. But even then, the invitation remains the same: show up as your full self. No shrinking. No appeasing. Real love asks you to be whole, not small. In teachings that emphasize mindfulness, there is a concept of non-attachment, not because we shouldn't care, but because we recognize that clinging distorts reality. When you hold too tightly to someone else's version of love, you begin to lose your own. What this moment offers is a reset. A reminder that love should never feel like survival. That you deserve to be chosen, not tolerated. That your heart, as fierce as it is also allowed to rest. Whether you stay or walk away, let the choice come from alignment, not avoidance. Let it be an act of liberation, not escape. You are not walking away from love, you are walking toward a truer version of it. One that includes you, fully and unapologetically. When life begins to stir in quiet, unexpected ways, through a conversation that lingers, a dream that feels more like memory than imagination, or a sensation in your chest that has no name but feels deeply familiar, it's not your mind playing tricks. It's your deeper awareness beginning to awaken. And this week, Leo, that awakening may not feel loud or dramatic. It might arrive like a subtle shift, like the gentle tilting of light across a familiar path that suddenly looks entirely new. The Lost Lands oracle speaks to a part of you that has always known. Not through logic or memory, but through a kind of inner resonance, the sense that something within you is far older than your circumstances, and far wiser than your doubts. It's as if your soul is recalling itself, not for nostalgia's sake, but to reclaim something essential you've outgrown or forgotten while surviving in a world that demanded you be something else. And that remembering, though subtle, changes everything. Leo energy thrives in expression, in embodiment, in visibility. But this week invites a quieter kind of expression, the courageous act of turning inward and asking not, how can I shine, but, what within me is ready to return? Because you are not just growing, you are returning. Returning to the part of you that knew how to trust without proof, how to move with clarity, and how to act without apology. There's a timeless principle that says when the student becomes still, the teaching appears. Not because someone outside gives them the answer, but because silence makes it possible to hear what's been waiting all along. That kind of silence has surrounded you in recent months, an almost invisible preparation. While you may have felt blocked or delayed, the truth is, the path has been preparing itself as much as you've been preparing for it. Now the signal is clear. The pieces begin to move. You are stepping into a moment that may look external, an opportunity, an invitation, a change in course. But what's actually happening is internal realignment. You're no longer acting from the habits of your old self. You're choosing, consciously and clearly, from the place you've arrived after all the endings, all the unravelings, all the lessons. You don't need to fight for space anymore. You don't need to prove your readiness. Your presence itself is the proof. This kind of evolution isn't measured by how far you go, but by how fully you show up in your own truth. The path ahead is not about becoming someone new. It's about having the clarity to release who you're not. And when you do, what remains is what's always been yours, your vision, your voice, your inner direction. That is where the real power lies, not in performance, but in alignment. What makes this week so significant is not just the potential it carries, but the awareness it unlocks. That awareness, even more than any material outcome, is the true gift. It brings with it the ability to discern what's real from what's reactive, what's calling you versus what's distracting you. And that discernment is what allows you to walk forward, not in haste, not in fear, but in deep, grounded knowing. So if something or someone appears this week and it feels deeply right, even if you can't explain why, pause and listen. If a decision feels peaceful rather than pressured, it's likely a direction worth exploring. This is not about chasing the future. It's about receiving the next step with both feet on the ground and both eyes open. You are not becoming. You are remembering. And that, Leo, changes everything. If you're still here, still breathing with me in this moment, then I know something inside you has stirred. Perhaps it was just a quiet whisper, barely audible above the noise of daily life. Or maybe it was a full body knowing that what you heard today was exactly what your soul has been waiting for. Either way, trust that your presence here isn't accidental. There's a reason you've stayed through every word, every insight, every invitation to return to yourself. And that reason has nothing to do with being fixed or changed. It has everything to do with remembering who you truly are beneath all the masks you've worn just to survive. Leo, you weren't born to ask for permission to shine. Your light is not something that needs to be earned. It already exists within you, endlessly available, even in the darkest hours. This week, the universe isn't asking you to do more. It's simply asking you to be real. To look gently at the stories you're still telling yourself and ask, is this still true for me? Because sometimes, the most powerful transformation doesn't begin with a dramatic leap, but with a subtle shift in direction, the kind that says, I'm no longer available for anything that dims me. You don't need to explain your evolution to anyone. You don't need to justify why something that once felt right no longer fits. The moment you start making decisions from alignment rather than fear, your entire reality begins to reshape itself. What if, just for today, you allowed yourself to stop striving and started receiving? What if the guidance you've been asking for has already arrived, just not in the form you expected? This is a powerful time to pause and reflect. I invite you to light a golden candle on May 29th. Write down what you're ready to release, fold it with care, and let it burn safely into ash. There's something beautiful in watching the weight you've carried dissolve into smoke. If you feel called, Wear deep crimson or copper orange this week, tones that awaken the solar fire within you, connecting you back to courage, creativity, and clarity. And if there are endings you've been postponing, truths you've been softening, ask yourself, what's really stopping me from letting go? I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm simply holding up a mirror and asking, what does your highest self already know, and are you ready to act on it? Because the path forward isn't paved by certainty. It's built step by step with self-trust. So now I turn it to you. What message from today resonated most deeply? Was there a phrase, a feeling, or a realization that stopped you in your tracks? Leave a comment below and share it with me. You can also type, I am ready to walk into my highest destiny, or drop in the angel numbers you've been seeing lately, 111, 444, 888, whatever's been following you. I promise you, you're not alone in this. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up, not just for this channel, but for your own healing. Every like, every comment, every share you offer isn't just helping eternal mindfulness grow, it's weaving a web of connection, healing, and purpose that reaches far beyond what you can see. So if this video has touched you, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing it with a Leo in your life who might need to hear, not every collapse is a tragedy. Sometimes, it's just the structure falling so that the soul can rise. And this week, Leo, your soul is rising.